Herb Simmons, come on up for our first award. Herb is going to present a Posthumous Award to Larry Matysik.
Herb, hang on.
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm honored to be here tonight to induct or honor somebody I had the pleasure of sharing over 50 years of my life. Larry Matysik, a lot of you know him. As I look out in the crowd, some of the greatest matches in St. Louis, we've got two of those legends right here, Jerry Briscoe and Dory Funk Jr. They could probably go at it tonight. I'm telling you. And I've had the opportunity of knowing them because of my good friend Larry. All week I've been thinking about how do you take a 50-year relationship and kind of condense it down into about a 10 or 15 minute legacy. And I finally, after trying to put things pen to paper, I just finally threw a stack of paper away and said, I'll just try to tell it from my heart. That's hard. Larry was 16 years old when he first went into the office of Sam Muchnick. Everybody remembers Sam Muchnick. President of the National Wrestling Alliance for about 41 years. So I look out, I see a lot of people there. Sergeant Slaughter, I got tapes of him when he wrestled in St. Louis. You know, it's just the memories that Larry shared with me. There was days that I used to get to go to the office with him, meet with Sam. And I was with him when he used to tell Larry, and he told me the same thing. He says, you know, in this great business that we call wrestling, if you keep these open and keep this shut, you'll go a long way in the business. And so I just started my 46th year of promoting. So I guess what Sam said works. Because of Larry, he introduced me to so many people. Like I said, he was 16. He didn't even have a driver's license the first day he walked into Sam's office. He loved to write, and he'd write magazine articles and submit them. And Sam seen that he had a talent and told him, you know, get your education. And then when he became able, he got his first check from Sam. And he had a couple other jobs early on. One of them lasted about 3 days, and the reason why it only lasted about 3 days is his boss wouldn't let him off to go do a show at Kiel Auditorium, so he quit. Another job, he lasted about 2 days. When he was going to college at Mizzou, it was too far to drive back and forth. Every 2 weeks when they were doing the shows, he said, nope, I'm coming back home, I gotta go to the wrestling match. So when you talk about somebody who loved wrestling, never being a worker, but Sam Muchnick was never a worker, but he knew the business, he knew what the fans loved, just as Sam did. He, like I said, never met a stranger. Favorite place he liked to go, we'd go and have business meetings, was local Steak and Shake. Everybody at Steak and Shake knew him. The only problem was is every time I either meet him there or later on when he became ill, I'd pick him up and take him, and we'd order our sandwiches, and every time somebody would come up and say, Larry, what about this match when Dick the Bruiser and Ric Flair fought? And by the time Larry got through telling the story, the sandwiches was cold, so we got used to eating cold Steak and Shake sandwiches. It happened every time, no matter where you took him. He was a household name every Saturday. Wrestling at the Chase started on television in 1959. 60 years ago this May. In fact, we do a show every May honoring that tradition. If it would have stayed on television, it had been 60 years old. We tie that in with our annual Bruiser Brody Memorial. And of course, this May it will be the Bruiser Brody Larry Matysik Memorial and the 60th year anniversary of wrestling at the Chase. And that's because people, like I said, Jerry Briscoe, Dory Funk Jr., Terry Funk, Sergeant Slaughter, you know, the name goes on and on. I was fortunate to Sam and Larry, I have all the records from back in the days that Larry gave me. If you wrestled in St. Louis, I can tell you how many matches you had. I can tell you if you won or lost. I can tell you the attendance at Kiel Auditorium if it was on television. I can tell you what color jacket Larry and Mickey Garagiola wore. And for those of you who don't know or know anything about wrestling at the Chase, Joe Garagiola was the first play-by-play announcer back in 1959. All of these people had the utmost respect for Larry Matysik, I can tell you. This gentleman right here, our MC tonight, J.J. Dillon, came and visited Larry about a month before he passed away. Nikolai Volkov came in and visited him. Jerry Briscoe, him and I talked probably every week. He wanted to know how Larry was doing. The outpour of support for somebody who was never a wrestler or worker in the ring was just overwhelmingly. As I said, he never met a stranger. A couple of months before he passed away, there was a business in his hometown that wanted to have a Larry Matysik night at a local comedy club. And he was real excited about that. Larry loved to talk wrestling, and he had such a memory. All I would have to do is say, Larry, 1969, Edouard Carpentier against Red Bastien. He could tell you who won. It was just like he was reading it, and he never had to do, you know, he just had a memory that was greater than any I ever saw. But that night it was at a comedy club, and we had him up on stage. And as I said, everybody in the county, Larry was a household name. Our county board chairman, who was here with us tonight, made the trip all the way in from St. Clair County, Chairman Mark Kern, gave him a proclamation declaring it Larry Matysik Day. And it was like it was Christmas to him. He gave him a big proclamation plaque, and he said, man, I never had anything like that. That's just the kind of guy he was. The only person I ever heard him say a crossword to was me. And that's because when, you know, up until, you know, the week before he passed away this past November, we were planning our big show we've been working on, December. We had really two big shows. It was our May show and the Wrestling at the Chase, and then we had a big Christmas show. And we'd been working on a big cage match show, and up until the week before he passed away, he was still putting finishes together, and I think he knew then, because he said, now look, you know, you got to make sure this does this and that. Some of my workers from SICW are here with us tonight, and I think they can all tell you that there was nobody like Larry Matysik in the dressing room, respected by everybody. And he was my dearest friend. The only other two people that I think that was closer to him than I was his daughter Kelly, who couldn't be here tonight. But the love of his life, his high school sweetheart, Pat, is here with us, and if you would, I'd like to have her come up now and accept this award on behalf of CAC. Put your hands together for Pat Matysick.
Herb pretty much said it all, but I'd like to start, instead of building a little tiny bit on that, is I would like to thank some people, if you don't mind. First, I'd like to thank the Cauliflower Alley Club, and especially Brian Blair, Scott Teal, and Carl Lauer. And I just want to let you know how much that we have appreciated all that you have done for us, and how much Larry loved the Cauliflower Alley Club and respected it, and how much he respected so many of you individually. I'd also just like to thank some personal people who came tonight, and it's just great to have them, because I mean, tears in my eyes from what Herb said, because it was all true. And I'd especially like to thank Herb and Mickey Simmons, who have been great friends, and especially this last year that was so hard to bear. and Mark Kern and Ken Easterly, who also have been just wonderful to us. Novell, who fashioned these shirts. And to Barbara, Darla, Carrie, Becky, Drew, to you, Larry passes the torch. Hold it high. Ben, Sparky, Gary, Jackie, Jay, Keith, and there are many others of you, and I'm sorry if I've forgotten somebody, but many of you have just helped me get through this very difficult time. We didn't expect this, and even at the end, Larry had his laptop and was writing 2 books, still writing 2 books, and they're almost finished. But he didn't quite finish them, but he wanted to, but up until the end, it was like we just thought he would keep going. And Herb talked about when Larry was so young, he started working for Sam, and that professionally was his start. But actually, he started before that. He told me he started when he was 13. And Larry would always keep the results and his rankings of the top wrestlers, male, female, tag teams, and he would use these little notebooks and write really tiny writing for a guy. And I thought it would be kind of fun to bring some of these, so I brought some along. They're in my room, but maybe I can get some down later. But I think it's really interesting that it was 1960, and in 1960, Larry was 13 years old. He wasn't even in high school. And he loved wrestling so much, he kept track of all these matches, and he had his rankings. And in 1960, there were magazines that paid him for this. But obviously, he was 13. They didn't know this 13-year-old kid was writing these rankings. But here you go, in 1960, the champion was Pat O'Connor. And on his ratings, number 1 was Killer Kowalski, 2, Buddy Rogers, 3, Antonio Rocco, 4, Edouard Carpentier, 5, Dick Hutton, and poor Luthez, the greatest guy in Larry's book, the greatest wrestlers, number 1, he was down to number 6. Vern Gagne was 7, 8 was Don Leo Jonathan, 10 was Dick the Bruiser, I believe. Anyway, just from a 13-year-old kid at the time. And Larry, as Herb said, he loved wrestlers, he loved wrestling, he loved wrestling fans. He never considered himself anything but a fan. He just, helped a lot of people just because he felt like he was one of them. He was never really the announcer. He was never really a celebrity. He was just another wrestling fan being together with what people he loved and doing the thing that he always loved to do. And what Herb said about us quitting those 2 jobs, actually he told people that he left University of Missouri Columbia because he wasn't with me and he wanted, I had to come from Carbondale and we'd be together. That wasn't it. He wanted to be here with wrestling, and he was. And I am a teacher, some of you know that, high school English teacher, and I just want to kind of tell you a little anecdote, kind of based on what Herb said about how many people loved Larry. And in the beginning, when Larry was on Wrestling at the Chase all the time, schools were different. And if a student misbehaved in your class, you could give him a pink slip, dismiss him, and he'd go up to the office and he'd come back. But if you kicked him out 3 times, you didn't have to take him back. He'd have to be in a study hall the rest of the year and go to summer school. So I had a student in my class, I hardly ever pink slipped anybody, but he was stabbing people. With the compass, like in geometry, that you make the circles with, the end of that, people would go down his rope and he'd stab them. And so, 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out. I said, no more. So he left, and a couple of days later, I see him coming toward my classroom. I always stood outside and greeted students as they came, and I saw him walking down with 2 really big guys on either side of him. And I'm thinking, uh-oh, this is going to be bad. And he came up to me and he said, "Is it true?" And I said, "Is what true?" And he said, "Is it true what my friends here say about you?" And I said, "I don't know. What did they say?" "Well, they said that Larry Matysik is your husband." And I said, "Well, yes, he is." And he said, "You know, I never would have acted like that if I'd known." And then he asked to come back. And then he said, "Well," I said, "No, you can't come back." And he said, "Well, can we come and visit you every week and talk wrestling?" And after that, he would bring friends. At one time, I had 20 kids in front of my classroom talking wrestling with me. So, I mean, everybody loved him, and he loved everybody who loved wrestling. And I thank all of you for being here, and I didn't mention all the names of all of you who have helped Larry, who have helped me, but thank you, and we really are very grateful for everything. And thank you once again, Cauliflower Alley Club, and congratulations to all the other people being honored here today. Thank you. And Jerry, thank you.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button to not miss any of our latest shoot interviews, match videos, or news updates. Support us on patreon.com for $1.99 a month to watch our full shoot interviews ad-free and help our channel grow. Follow us on Twitter at the Hannibal TV for instant updates.